Federal judge guts Florida law requiring felons to pay fines before they can vote. The 24th Amendment precludes Florida from conditioning voting in federal elections on payment of these fees and costs, he wrote, referring to the constitutional amendment that bans poll taxes. This is great news. That's exactly what it was, a poll tax. This is huge. As a Floridian, when we voted on this, we were not informed that any fines or fees would be included. This is something the Republicans added in after it passed as a way to suppress voters. Of course, this is bad news for DeSantis and Trump, which is why it will be contested. Hopefully the judges stay strong. This is a win for voters and democracy. Something we aren't seeing much these days. Republican lawmakers and Gov. Ron DeSantis pushed the measure. Because voter suppression gives Republicans wet dreams. Over 1 million ex-felons that were previously denied the right to vote in a swing state. You can bet this isn't over. They'll still find a way to deny these people from voting guaranteed. Numbers like that are too scary for Republicans. Removed. The fact that this thing was even considered, let alone passed and signed, tells you all you need to know about the Florida government's understanding of federal law. It's great that this horrible law will not serve the function that Florida Republicans hoped it would. They don't care about the right to vote. Mitch McConnell is working overtime so these things won't happen in the future. Edit. Thanks for the award, kind Redditor. My first. I lived in Florida when we, the voters, voted to restore voting right to felons. The GOP-run state did everything possible to subvert the will of the people. We also voted to stop gerrymandering, but that continues. The state stinks with corruption. Enormous news. Next step, reach out, get them registered, and turn them out in 2020. And if you're wondering whether something like this will matter, in 2017, Alabama changed their law and restored voting rights to some convicted felons. Voting rights groups worked like crazy to get ex-felons registered to vote. Many of those new voters were black, which is also the case in Florida. That December, Doug Jones did the impossible and won statewide as a Democrat in Alabama. I know, lots of other factors went into that victory. But Florida isn't as red as Alabama is. If we do our part to help, this could make an enormous difference in November, and down the road. Trump supporters, how many Democrat governors or lawmakers who have tried to keep people from voting by hook or crook can you name? How many Republicans? Can you name more than one president? Imagine making a mistake at 18 and never being able to vote for the rest of your life because of it. I thought you paid your debt to society in prison, not after. One of the most outrageous thing the Republican Party has done lately is to overturn the will of the voters in their states. The voters of Florida overwhelmingly voted to approve a constitutional amendment to their constitution allowing ex-felons to reacquire the right to vote, and to circumvent this the Republican legislature passed a law requiring them to repay any damages owed from their sentence before they could vote. It was strictly a poll tax to bypass the will of the Florida voters. They should remember how they were treated, and throw every Republican who voted to overturn the amendment voted on by Floridians out of office. Just wait for Trump supporters to talk about how there are thousands of issues with fraud because of this. None will be found, but accepting reality is not a prerequisite for being a Trump supporter. I don't even get the ostensible argument against allowing felons to vote. Like, so you don't want them to take a step toward being active citizens and do their civic duty. How about we end the stupid war on drugs and let all these non-violent people out of prison and into a productive society? Judge Hinkle also struck down Florida's gay marriage ban in 2015. This guy don't take no shit from the America's Wong. Thank God the judge saw it as a poll tax and struck it down. That ruling should stand firm all the way through SCOTUS. How are we to overturn unjust laws if those punished by them can't vote? Stopping anyone from voting is un-American. The United States Constitution guts that Florida law as it's a poll tax. I think that's bullshit. I feel that once a person has completed their sentence and paid their debt to society, then he or she should be able to effing vote. Republicans. Asking me to wear a mask and social distance myself is unconstitutional tyranny. Also Republicans. Taking away other people's right to vote is perfectly fine if it helps us win. If they're still citizens, they get to vote. How hard is this to grasp? It's mind-boggling to think there would have been no Iraq war if Florida felons were allowed to vote in 2000. What fool in Florida thought a poll tax would be constitutional? Sounds like someone fell asleep in their US history class. It always amazes me that the ignorant are allowed to run our country, and they're the ones complaining about too many people having the right to vote. I'd rather take that right away from them on the grounds that they're too ignorant to be trusted with it, but, hey, that's illegal, too. The difference between me and them is that I know it's illegal. Personally, I think they should have voting booths in prisons. They should have a say in the laws that lock them up. Democracy is bad for Republicans. Voter disenfranchisement is probably the #1 thing I'm opposed to politically, because I think you're right to democratically decide the government needs to be outside of the government's power, otherwise the government will inevitably try to self-preserve by taking these things away, as we've seen them do. No matter how heinous the crimes committed, I think people should be allowed to vote. Frankly, I'm surprised this isn't a unifying issue. The right should appreciate it from a government accountability and limited power perspective, and the left should value it from a fairness and equality standpoint. The governor of Iowa is proposing a state constitutional amendment to restore voting rights for felons. Hopefully this will prevent them from requiring the restitution repayment that is being considered as part of the amendment. It's about time. They did their time. Why revoke their human rights for life? As a non-American, I never understood why you don't let criminals vote. They are still people of your country. Could somebody explain? When I was in school for criminal justice, we had a professor that made us all realize and understand that you get charged and sent to jail and released, you have paid your debt to society. You shouldn't have to keep paying and paying and paying for it. So the laws that keep them from housing or jobs don't logically make sense. The idea that they are less of a citizen doesn't hold water. Republican lawmakers and Gov. Ron DeSantis pushed the measure. Color me surprised. I voted to allow felons in FL to be allowed to vote. WTF is this shit, and why do they keep coming up with excuses? Good. Everyone should be able to vote, felon or not. Nothing makes Trump and the right wing angrier than people exercising their right to vote. Call me fucking crazy, but anyone who is no longer under sentence should be allowed to vote regardless of their criminal past. Shit, even people not currently in custody should be allowed to vote. Criminals shouldn't vote. However, I am going to vote for one. Little victories make the big victory. Sending love from the north, y'all got this. If they would just elect Democratic governors, they wouldn't have to worry about all these shenanigans. If our country has so many felons that it's going to majorly influence a vote, then maybe that shit really needs to happen. Why the fuck would we have so many felons? How can that not be a failure of the system as it currently functions? Honestly, felons should never lose their right to vote.